Today, we're going to touch on some controversial subjects. Is seating in the church sacred? In other words, if someone sits in your seat, are they committing a sin? Here's another subject. Here's a question. Should Christians go to things like Diddy parties? Stick around. We're going to talk about it.
Welcome to my take. Well, it's not my take, it's Miguel Crespo's take. Whatever. For inspiration to go.
Welcome to My Take, Pastor Crespo here. My Take is your oasis of inspiration and hope in the desert of negativity and despair. Thank you for being a part of the My Take family. Yes, we are here today to talk about a couple of interesting subjects. I have some guests with me. They are regulars. They've been here before. Pastor Warren Muir out in the Elmira area, Pastor DeLeon out in the Buffalo area. Let's start with Pastor Warren Muir. Now, I know you had some power problems out your way, and so rather than your usual setup, you're joining us via cell phone. So we'll cut you some slack. We're going to grant you some grace. But how you doing, Pastor Warren?
I am doing well, and it's good to be back on this back on air again.
Pastor DeLeon, how are things?
Enjoying the defrosting that we're going through. I love winter, but I'm enjoying the season, and I'm glad to be having a conversation with both of you.
Great. Well, look, we got some interesting things to talk about today. I don't have it here queued up, but there are topics that I've done in the past where my wife has said to me, I don't think as a pastor you should be talking about this stuff. And so I actually created a something called a warning. My take, this is not wife approved, but it I don't have that queued up right now, but this probably would not be wife approved, guys. Just letting you know. The first one is an easy one. We have. I like to go to advice columns once in a while to see what people are talking about, and just see what if someone were to ask that from me, what would I say? I don't know if that says that I'm nosy or what, but here is a piece of advice that I think should not have been sent to this column. It's on al.com, and I believe the person that does the answering her name is Miss Manners. She received this, and I thought, you know what? You should have talked to a pastor about this one. Let me read it to you guys. I want to get your feedback. I want to find out what you guys think on this, all right? So this is how it starts. It says, Dear Miss Manners, my child's choir held a concert at a large historic church. I arrived early and took a seat on the center aisle, where I would have the best view of the singers. A short time later, an older couple arrived and asked to share my pew. So I stood up to allow them to enter. The gentleman indicated that I should go ahead of them, to which I replied that I would like to stay on the aisle. They seemed taken aback, offended, and walked off to find their other seat. So her question, does church etiquette dictate that those arriving first to an event held in a church must always move to the middle pew or the middle of the pew? Or, as I thought, is it equally polite to stand and allow others to enter? So, guys, I didn't know. I mean, I guess it's true that there is church etiquette, right? What is the church? What's the church etiquette? I mean, I know the things we believe in are sacred, but is church, sounds like church seating is sacred too. What's your take? What advice would you give? How would you help this lady understand what's going on here? Let's go with you first, Warren. You're in the middle there.
Yeah, so this is it's almost fun topic, I might use the word, because when you really think of it, in the Christian spaces, particularly in a church setting, as Christians, one, we're called to deny ourselves. But how much do you deny yourself? Do you actually get up out of your seat because someone came late? So for me, there are more questions to this. But personally, I personally would be very happy to have new people at church, late people at church. So I would happily give up my seat for somebody else. I'll start there.
You're a good Christian. You're a good Christian. Pastor De Leon, what's the deal here? There's church
Well,
etiquette. What is it?
yeah, yeah, no, for sure. I mean, church is a community event, right? So, people should expect other people in different seating assignments. But I also have encountered some churches that have plaques on certain like pews that technically that person has been a church member there or so forth. So I know in some churches like assigned seating is like a thing, maybe of the past, but regardless, I think the proper etiquette is to if so first come first serve. That's the way I look at it, and I know people have to pass by, but once you pass by, you can. There's nothing wrong with. I think it is wrong to tell someone you're in my seat. There's nothing wrong with allowing someone to pass by, and I think she handled it well. Human, respectable, and other. Obviously, the church isn't perfect, so
I think
that can
I
happen.
think you guys are good Christians. Let me tell you why. Because this lady stumbled into a problem that exists in some of our churches. Come on now. You know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
If when
Yep.
human beings are creatures of habit, right? You go to
Mm-hmm.
church, you sit down, and all of a sudden you start getting what's called the stink eye. You get the stink eye from somebody. Why are you looking at me that way? And you come to find out afterwards, you sat in their regular spot.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to just take a moment here. Let's talk a little bit about the church etiquette. It's not it's not written in the Ten Commandments. It's nowhere
Mm-hmm.
in the Bible. It's nowhere in the church manual or church handbook. But there are certain rules that people live by. One is don't sit in my seat. Right now, tell me, am I wrong? Am I making this up, or are we? Am I talking about an issue that we often see?
I've seen it. I personally have seen it. But do I agree with it? No, but I've seen it.
So I'm curious. Are there
by, by
other? Oh, go ahead, Warren.
I was saying, by nature, we human beings are territorial people. So we have a spot marked out, and we like to consistently go back to the same spot. But it's
Mm-hmm.
true. I've done some, what you would say, extra biblical reading, and it talks about order in church. Order in church, and it talks about the first people who get there. I mean, obviously, they're gonna pick the seat they prefer first.
Yeah,
So I would say to people, if you want to make a very good pick, go to church the earliest, and you can pick whatever seat you want. That will
That's
work,
one way. That's right. If you want to avoid some of this, just go to church early, claim your spot, plant your flag, put a plaque like Edgar's talking about. Uh, now, let me ask you a question. What are there any when we think about church? There are some funny things because human beings, we tend to be funny like that. What are other unwritten rules in church? For example, clothing. What type of clothing should you expect to wear when you go to church? Do you ever see that be
So
an issue in a
I
church?
believe in.
Oh,
Go ahead,
go
Esther.
ahead,
Go ahead,
Dylan
Edgar.
Edgar. Go ahead, Edgar.
Oh, well, the one thing that I've encountered, and I don't know if it's in just immigrant communities, was like not wearing shorts. For men to not wear shorts when going to church. That was like the biggest thing. I remember my church that I would go to as a child had a gymnasium, so I dressed for the gymnasium part. But when I went to church side of it, they got upset with me. So that was my experience.
And you still stayed in the church, man.
Yeah,
That.
yeah.
Some people get turned away. Warren.
Yeah, so it is true that there are many unspoken rules in church. And I think I'll go back to the original place we started and kind of move from there. If you think about the actual act of worship, I remember in my days when I was single, I would go to church an hour early, literally. And I would like to sit quietly and just meditate in a sacred space. So, thinking of it from that line, maybe that's one of the reasons to not disturb others.
Uh-huh.
because they might dare to just have a quiet time ahead of time, and then you come and ask them to move.
Right.
That can be disrupting their worship experience.
Yeah,
So
that could.
there's that part to it. But again, it comes back to self-denial to me, where if we truly learn to deny self, we can solve half the problem we have.
Yeah, no, I think she's touching on this person's touching on an interesting subject. Let me run another idea as it relates to church etiquette. Um, in the Protestant churches, we celebrate communion differently than say the Catholic Church. And when we, as a pastor and having the opportunity to travel to a lot of different churches, it's interesting how the churches practice communion. So some churches, you have to have white gloves for those participating in communion.
Mm-hmm.
You have to wear a white tie when you're participating in communion. Um, just curious, is that if you don't, then you are committing a grave sin. Is what's your take? What Edgar? Have you ever had to deal with that? How do you deal with maybe not communion, maybe it's something else? But what happens when you run into something where etiquette you're not basically keeping up with the local etiquette? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so when I first started pastoring, I did communion service. We did a communion service, and I was approached after the service that, for those that go to Protestant churches, we have the bread that represents the body of Jesus. And when you go to First Corinthians chapter 11, it says that Jesus broke, and then the point is, an elder in his 80s came up to me afterwards and said, "Pastor, you did something wrong." And I said, "What did I do wrong?" He said, "I didn't break the bread,
Yeah,
be, you know, before giving it to everyone." And I thought that was such a big thing. In my mind, it wasn't. And I
yeah,
accepted, I accepted what he was trying to communicate to me. I also was able to process
yeah,
like where the limitations are in his counsel to me. So I think being able to hear people's like input, but also having a well balanced perspective is important. And I'm not just saying as a church leader, I'm saying this as people, right?
yeah,
We
yeah,
also we always hear people's ridiculousness. That doesn't mean you have to fight them or you need to automatically disagree with them or you need to be changed by them, but you can hear them. So that was my experience. Honestly, germ theory makes me not want to touch bread all the time, when we're having.
yeah, yeah,
But I heard what he was saying.
yeah. So, Pastor Muir, have you ever had an issue where you've run across maybe you've broken a local etiquette? How have you handled that? Could be communion, could be something else.
Yeah, I have seen it. I currently have I pastor three churches, and in one of these three churches, there is an immigrant elder, and apparently things were done a certain way in his home country, and that is the standard. And if you deviate in the smallest egregious sin, and what I do personally, I try to be flexible as long as it is within reason and
Yeah,
within
yeah,
counsel. I try to be flexible. At the same time, I also try to teach because, for example, Pastor Edgar shared one earlier. For me, this time we served the grape juice and the bread together, and I did commit the unpardonable sin for doing so. You are
oh,
supposed to break the bread literally, like
yeah,
in Edgar's case, what the elder told him. You're supposed to break that bread, not have it already broken. Break that bread. Then you go serve the bread, and then you come back, and then you go serve the grape juice.
right,
And
right,
so
right,
I work with people the best as I can, as long as I say, it's within reason.
right. It's funny. I hate to, I don't want to be gross here, but people have a problem if you break the bread or not, but they don't complain after because you do the foot washing before you do the breaking of the bread. They just assume you washed your hands before you went out there. But anyway, so here's my thing, and I did not get the name of the lady who wrote for the advice. The one thing you run across, maybe you break an etiquette in a local church. Just don't let it stop you from going to church. That would be the big thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
There
That's the
you go.
key.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're gonna get into something serious here. Um, I have been just watching the news. I'm sure you have as well. You all know who Sean Sean Combs is, otherwise known as P. Diddy. I guess he's got a couple of different names. P. Diddy, Puffy Combs, he's this famous musician, rapper, multi-millionaire. I don't know if he's a billionaire or not, but, obviously when you're famous, the spotlight is on you. And he had developed a friendship with a pastor by the name of T.D. Jakes. I think you've heard of him, Bishop Jakes. He's a popular TV preacher. I believe he's a pastor of the Potter's House, I think it's called.
Yes.
I want to share this article with you, and then I want to get your feedback because I do have a serious question. I thought we could spend some time on this podcast, talking about it. So let me share this. This article has to do with the fact that not only is Sean Combs being investigated, he's in jail currently for throwing these what they call Diddy parties. And if you don't know what a Diddy party is, then you're better off. But if you hear it on the news, right, Sean Combs is known for throwing these crazy, salacious parties where they're breaking just about all the commandments in these places. And he apparently was using it to maybe even blackmail people, get things from them. But he's been arrested for all sorts of sex trafficking crimes. And now they're talking about this list. How many people have been there? Well, guess the name, one of the names is Bishop T.D. Jakes. So this article has to do with that. Let me read some of this to you. It says Dallas megachurch pastor of the Potter's House, Thomas Dexter Jakes, I didn't know that, T.D. Jakes, has been mentioned in a lawsuit that associates him with Sean Combs. The lawsuit was found by Combs' producer and accuses Combs and several of his associates of participating in a sex trafficking venture. Supposedly, he had something like 200 cameras in just one of his homes where he was recording all of the different things that was happening. On top of what they were doing, he was recording it. Let's see. The person suing them is seeking $30 million in compensation. Now, why am I bringing this up? The reason I'm bringing this up is because there is a list. There is a list of people who attended Sean Diddy's parties. And one of the people that attended the parties is Bishop T.D. Jakes. Now, according to this article, it basically says that Sean Combs became friends with T.D. Jakes. One of the reasons is he thought if he could become friends with T.D. Jakes, it would help clean up his image so that he would kind of, this bad boy idea that he's this really bad guy, somehow now he's tying himself to a Christian pastor. But when it came out that T.D. Jakes had allegedly, gotta be careful here, he had allegedly been to a Diddy party, he, on his own Potter's House program, came out and said something like this. He said this in refuting. He said, the worst that could happen, if everything was true, all I got to do is repent sincerely from my heart, he said. There's enough power in the blood to cover all kinds of sin. I don't care what it is. The blood would fix it. And then he adds, but I ain't got to repent about this. So he's basically saying, I didn't do anything. If I did do anything, I just have to repent. So this article is really talking about the relationship. What I found interesting as I was reading this is that T.D. Jakes is not the only pastor mentioned in the list. There are 38 pastors who are reported to have allegedly attended these Diddy parties where all sorts of this craziness was going on. Now, let me ask you first, just to get it out of the way, neither of you have been to a Diddy party, right?
No, I have not.
Pastor Muir, I didn't hear any denial. I just need to make sure.
Yes, I have not been to one of the Diddy parties.
Okay, all right. I just want to. I neither have I. Neither have I. So, all right. So let me ask you first of all. We'll start with you, Edgar. What have you? I mean, did you know about this? Have you heard about this? What are your thoughts about this situation?
No, I definitely heard about this. We should be aware of the things going around us because there's a lot of things that we can learn on how to communicate with our people to process things well. And the question that you ask is really important because the Bible does describe Jesus hanging out with sinners, right? eating with sinners, and that's where the Pharisees had an issue with Jesus. Now, the Bible also shows moments where believers are, let's say, working in the government of Babylon, just like Daniel was. So the question is, in this situation, should a Christian, let alone a pastor like T.D. Jakes, who's highly influential, I believe in the description, his church has around 30,000 members. It's a lot of people just on this singular church. Should he be attending Diddy parties? And my first question is, did he have to be there? Just because we're invited somewhere doesn't mean we have to accept the invitation. Because Diddy himself, if you do a little bit of character research, he was known for parties. Like he advertised parties. Actually, in the 90s, he set up this basketball tournament that led to a stampede, and multiple people died. It was a
Wow.
really sad thing. You can look it up in the research about Diddy. So the point is, he's known for parties. So when an invitation is extended to a faith leader, that person, in the especially in the Black community, they know what he's about. He throws these parties that obviously, like you said, they're not what you would say a good party or that a
It's
Christian
not
would approve
Tupperware.
of, or so
They're not
forth.
selling Tupperware.
Yeah, it's not Mary Kay, you know. So he decided to go there, whether for influence, whether to live in that community, like be around that people in that community, in the uber wealthy community. That is what comes to my mind. No one forced him, so the fact that this is an issue should have some type of accountability to say, hey, you willingly accepted it. Do you think this is okay? And to a
Yeah.
certain extent, he does think it's okay because he says there's no repentance needed, which is, in my opinion, a strong person can say, I messed up. And obviously, at this point in time, he doesn't believe he's there.
Yeah, yeah. Warren, what do you think? Have you heard about this before? Do you have you know what are your thoughts on this thing with TD Jakes and the Diddy parties?
So I've seen it in the news. I've seen articles. I've seen different reports on it. And one of the first things that come to my mind is, as Christians, which everybody else should do, we should have healthy boundaries. And going to a Diddy party, I don't know how we can explain that from scriptures that it is okay to do. Because there are some parties that are just worldly parties. It has nothing to do with a Christian environment. These are parties obviously where people do drugs, people get drunk. I don't that's not the space where you can effectively be your best witness you can for Jesus Christ. So to me, it's questionable that you will use a cover story to cover up going there. It is true that love covers a multitude of sins, but I believe there are also forbidden grounds, places that we will not have our best witness for Jesus Christ, places that bring out the worst in other human beings. And if we venture there, we won't have a good space to be the witness Christ has called us to. There are places off limits for Christians, I believe, based on the word of
Oh,
God. There are
wow.
places we shouldn't be going. There are places we should stay out of.
Yeah.
You know, and so I will start there. Christians need to establish healthy boundaries, as are all humans. And I believe there was a violation there of healthy Christian boundaries in going to these parties.
You said something really interesting. You said that there are some places that are off limits for Christians. I'd never heard it put like that, but that's about as straight and clear as you can be, right? But let me ask you though, and in the case of Bishop Jakes, it's alleged that he didn't just attend; it's alleged he participated. I'm not saying, I'm just saying what's been said on the news. I'm not saying that it's true or not, but here we have a pastor who's attending a party where it's known, as you're saying, drugs, alcohol, illicit sex, just all sorts of crazy stuff, and stuff that people were saying that they were sexually abused using the rape word. I mean, excuse me. So the what I'd like to focus on a bit here is how far is too far. I was approached by a colleague, a pastor, many years ago. He said he wanted to do an outreach. He wanted to connect with people in the community, so he wanted to go to a local bar, and he said, "Come with me. We'll sit at a booth, and we'll just strike up conversations with people." And I was a brand new pastor at the time, and I said, I don't think I want to be going to a bar because I got to answer to somebody. But he was explaining, look, we need to be where the people are at. We're not going to drink. We'll have ginger ale. We'll strike up conversations with people. And I did not feel comfortable, so ultimately I didn't go. And I'm not saying that he was right or wrong, but as you said, Jesus was accused of partying with sinners. So then, what is the line? How do you draw a line? Because let's say someone who is a big time music millionaire, he's doing all these things, living this life, living a godless life. Doesn't he need Jesus too? Doesn't he need to hear the gospel? Doesn't he need to have someone come into his space and share with him? Where is that line? So I want to ask each of you. We'll start, Warren, with you this time. Could you share a little bit to answer that question? But I would like to know, like, what do you do for yourself? I mean, what are some boundaries that you place on yourself that maybe people don't know about? As pastors, we set boundaries for ourselves. But what are some of those things? And can you share a little bit about how far is too far? How far should you go? I mean, is it all right to go to a bar and try and strike up conversations with people?
So in the past, I have personally set foot into a bar to reach to someone. But I went to talk to the bartender because at least they should be sober. And it was like just dropping off. It was just dropping off some Christian literature to that bartender. It was an in and out kind of experience because most of the patrons at the bar, they're going to be tipsy, they're going to be drunk. So that's not a good state of mind to talk with them about God in. And I people like Diddy ought to be reached with the gospel, but I don't think I have to wait for his party to try to reach him. I can reach him on a more quiet setting. I can set an appointment with him. I can meet him at a restaurant. I can meet him somewhere else because the rich ought to be reached for Christ as well. And so when you look at the Bible and the Pharisees' accusation, they say, this man eats with sinners. He actually had him in a space, and we could use a restaurant today. He wasn't quite at a party. He was at somewhere where he could communicate with them, and the music wasn't bellowing so loud that you can't have a conversation. And so he was at dinner with them. He was eating with sinners. And I think we can have very good conversations over a meal. And so a party is quite different from a meal. So for me, as a Christian, I will find another way to reach sex workers rather than going to the strip club to see them. I will meet them somewhere else. I don't need to go to a strip club in order to reach sex workers. I don't need to go to a carnival to be able to reach the people who dance and participate in a carnival. And I heard this interesting story. And this means that if you go on certain grounds, you might just get tainted. There was a pastor who heard that his members were going to the club. And so he decided that he's going to go to the club to look for the members. He himself is an old club member. He used to go clubbing. And so they say he got into this club, and when the music hit him, he used to listen to that music and enjoy it before he started to move. And he's doing all the moves. And somebody walked up to him and said, man, aren't you the pastor? And he looked at the person and said, I'm looking for my members. I'm looking for my... And he's in the mode. And we might just get caught up if we go to these places and the old nature come roaring back into action,
Warren, I just had... you got to pray for me, man. I can get quite silly, but I just had this picture in my mind. Somebody said, hey, did you hear about Jesus? He went to a Zacchaeus party. Yeah, he went to a Zacchaeus party. I don't think they were quite the same. I don't think they were quite the same as the Diddy
Yes.
Party. But Edgar,
Yes.
just
Yes.
curious about your thoughts on this. How far is too far?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that we always have, right? Is like, how do we, with our conscience as Christians, interact with those that either don't know about God's, guidance, or two, are openly rebelling against God. I think that some people can burn bridges, and then we don't have people to witness to. But I go back as I reflect on this. I go back to the principle that I mentioned earlier, is that these parties they're not just, hey, let's go to someone's home, they're great food, great conversation. They were known for indulging in pretty ridiculous things. So for TD Jakes to try to find a time to witness, or even a time to have an influence, it
Mm,
really, I don't think it's genuine, because it's about indulging. It's not about even having a conversation, or having some type of place to like get to know people. And I think that this situation really highlights that, yeah, the people that surround you really do impact like your own faith journey, or your own way to like process life. And I'm not of the person to say like you shouldn't be around people who drink. Let's say, like, if your family drinks alcohol, but it's a family gathering, what are you gonna do? Shun them? What's
right,
the opposite? Like, I don't think that's the case. But should you be going to a place that's an open debauchery, I think is another word that people use. That just doesn't seem like it's a place for a Christian who wants to be true to the Lord and his conscience and others, because there are victims.
right.
There are victims that have, come out with, after the Me Too movement, now are empowered to bring some accountability, that no one in church is challenging Diddy. The Now it
Mm,
takes the courts and the police to do that. It's just a sad situation.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and my heart goes out to the victims.
yeah. I think about this situation. How far is too far? And in some ways, I'm going to say something may not sound right at the outset, but I think it depends. For example,
Mm,
if you were a drunkard and God
mm-hmm,
turns your life around, you probably don't want to go where there's alcohol being served if you were an
mm-hmm.
alcoholic. That's not the place, right?
Yep,
Um,
yep.
if you want to, you mentioned prostitutes. You go down to what they call Skid Row or the red light district, and
Mm-hmm,
you're talking to people to try and just have a conversation. Well, not if you were a customer, not if that's you that you
mm-hmm,
were that this was a problem for you. That's not the place to go. I think sometimes that for me, I may not look it now, but I was a pretty handsome guy back in the day, and I was a dog. I mean, I couldn't be trusted around ladies that I wouldn't somehow try to say something or put a move on someone. I wasn't very faithful to
mm-hmm.
any girlfriends that I had, and because of that, and it's not that it's a weakness, but I've set certain rules. I don't meet alone with women. Sorry, I just don't meet alone with them. I don't open that door. And when I talk to a woman in church, and I make sure that someone's around. And I was invited to do a Bible study once with a young lady who wants to be baptized, and I said, I can't study alone with you. Is your husband free so that we can study together? And
Mm-hmm.
those are bound. And by the way, the husband was baptized as well. God did. He's
Amen.
an amazing God. But those are boundaries
Amen.
that I've set for myself, not because I'm going to do these things, but why open the door? Why open a
Mm-hmm.
door? So I was curious.
I have
I
I have a thought too.
Go ahead, Warren. What?
I just had this thought. So I want to reach United States Marines. Do I come out to the battlefield when you are in active combat, shooting at the enemy? Is that the space for me to come out and talk to you as a soldier?
Oh, good point. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, so I'm curious here. What advice would you give? So we're not talking about just pastors now. What advice would you give a Christian? They want to reach their world. They are wanting to go places where maybe other people don't go. I'm going to give each of you guys an opportunity to give some advice. Give some advice to someone who's wanting to reach across that proverbial abyss and try to share the gospel with people who are living these type of lives. Let's start first with I'm gonna start first with Warren, and then we'll go to Edgar. Warren, what would you say to someone who's genuinely having questions? Not the Diddy parties. You know, we know that that's a bit of a that's an extreme situation. But what advice would you give?
So my first advice would be to be prayerful about your mission. Be prayerful. Talk to God very seriously about what you want to do. And one good piece of counsel too is to talk with other more experienced Christian than yourself, who have done maybe similar ministries to what you want to do. And so, because it's true, Jesus wants us to make disciples of as many people as possible, people in all kind of sinful traps that he wants to take out. So be prayerful, talking to other senior Christians, and definitely consult the scriptures about your mission.
Mhm.
And so be prayerful about time and place so you can actually find the best time to actually reach these individuals when they're far more susceptible to the gospel.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, Edgar, what would your advice be? Again, how far is too far?
Yep. My advice would be that we need to be have our conscience clear that we're not going to put ourselves in a place where we compromise like our faith or even are abusing or hurting other people, especially in this type of context with Diddy, but in life in general. But I also like what Pastor Warren said. We need to be very well that we have a place to share our faith and uh, now how does that look like? Where can we share that experience with Christ with others, and or else we become an island or we become isolated from our community that we're called to witness to. So being able to balance that out, and it's going to look different for different people, like you mentioned, Pastor Miguel, like it's going to be different and it's going to be case by case, but we should be able to consult with other mature Christians to say, hey, help me process this well, because I don't want to put myself in a compromising situation, not just for myself but for the Lord, because obviously with when we put ourselves in certain situations, we are supposed to be representatives of Christ, and
Mm-hmm.
we can't put ourselves in a bad situation, and it's tricky, it's difficult, but the Lord will give us guidance and wisdom.
Yeah, I think excellent, excellent. Let me share some thoughts as well, kind of bringing this to a close here. I think, and so I want to talk to two things. One is, for those pastors that attended those Diddy parties, you know, um, you're gonna have to answer to a higher power. What happened in those places is between you and God. We have to be very, very careful. If you hang out with people that don't love God, there's a very real possibility that they're going to change you. You go there to change them, and they end up changing you. You need to be very, very careful. But there's something that I would like for you to think about. For that is for those people, you want to reach people where they're at. You want to go where they're at. So they're at a bar. So they're at parties, and so I'm going to go and be friends with them. Here's something that you might not consider, and that is if you're sincere. Now I'm saying you're not participating in the shady stuff. You're actually going because in your mind you've somehow justified that it's okay. I want to go. I'm going to be friends with them. I'm going to show them Jesus. Like Jesus ate with sinners. I'm going to go. Okay. Here's the deal. More often than not, when you go to those places, you don't do anything except dishonor yourself. They actually have less respect for Christians when they do this type of thing.
Mhm.
They don't look at you as someone that's honorable. They say, oh, you're just like I am. You're here. There is no difference between the Christian and the non-Christian. So you may go there thinking you're trying to do something good, but you need to be careful, because the moment you participate, the moment you laugh at a dirty joke, the moment you partake, or let's say something shady happens and no, you didn't participate, but you're giving that side eye, you're looking, you're taking it into your senses. You didn't do anything but dishonor yourself. And guess what? You also dishonored the God that you said you wanted to go there and lift up. So we need to be very careful. I like what you said, Warren. There are some places that are off limits to Christians. I wanna share a Bible verse here, and then we'll kind of close up here. Romans chapter 12, verse 2. I'll leave you with this. And let not your behavior be like that of this world, but be changed and made new in mind, so that by experience you may have knowledge of the good and pleasing and complete purpose of God. Guys, I want to give you one last opportunity. Is there anything you want to share before we end the podcast? Starting with Warren.
So I say to folks, search the scriptures, follow the preacher Jesus Christ. He will not go anywhere or take you anywhere that you should not go. Human beings will fail, and TD Jakes, over the years, he's been a very good motivational speaker. And that's kind of a little bit different from the preachers of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so follow Jesus. He will always lead you where it's right.
Very good. Thank you. Edgar, any parting words?
I would I'll refer to the first introductory story. If you go into a church setting and the church setting is, you feel out of place, you feel like maybe everyone's not as welcoming, like, remember that in the midst of people who may not be the friendliest, there will be other Christians who are not like that. Don't let a bad experience disqualify you from trying another church, because Christians are human, and because they're human, they can be selfish, and because they're selfish, we're called to be different, and we're called to love, called to be not be selfish. That doesn't mean one bad experience doesn't mean that everyone's like that. So keep that in mind when we intermingle with our church. Not some people can bite.
There you go. There you go. Guys, I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me for this episode. Thank you for being a part of the My Take family and watching the episode. We'll see you next time.